Welcome back to Coffee Talk, where we dive into the world of personal finance, financial empowerment, and everything in between. Today we have a special guest joining us, Sarah Brady, a personal finance reporter with a wealth of experience in credit and housing counseling. Sarah's work has helped countless individuals navigate the often tricky waters of money management, credit issues, and housing challenges. She's here today to share her insights, stories, and actionable advice that you won't want to miss. Get ready for an episode packed with real-life financial wisdom. So let's get into it. Hi, Sarah. Welcome to Coffee Talk. Thank you so much for agreeing to chat with us today. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me, April.
So can you tell our audience a little bit about you, your journey? I know you have kind of a fascinating history, and I also wanted to bring up the dyscalculia as well.
You know, I like to joke that I got into financial education by accident, but I've stayed on purpose. So that gives you a little overview of my story. I sort of fell into financial education against my will. That was back in around 2013. And I just really fell in love with financial education in that role. Working in a call center, talking to people day in and day out about the financial struggles they were having, helping people solve financial problems. It was just kind of like a high for me. I really loved it. And I started teaching workshops in that role. In particular, I was teaching homebuyer workshops together with the city of San Francisco, helping people buy affordable housing. In terms of how I got to where I am now, you know, I'm a personal finance writer. I write for a lot of different outlets. You might find my, advice articles online with Forbes Advisor or even at the NFCC's website. I ended up in fintech for a little while after becoming a credit counselor. And after a layoff, I really had to rethink what I was doing. And I just missed financial education so much. So I decided to give it a go as a freelancer and started teaching workshops again for nonprofits, started writing about money, and that was 7 years ago. So here I am now.
You know what I find so fascinating is how you got in the world of credit counseling and helping people with finance with having dyscalculia, which is considered a learning disability. So can you tell us a little bit about that, how you were diagnosed with dyscalculia, and then how did it work or not work with your financial education journey?
For folks who have dyscalculia, they have challenges processing numbers. So the way you think of it is if you see a number written down or if you hear someone speak a number, I might remember that number differently in my mind than what I saw or heard. And then if I say it back to you or I write it down, I might, at any step in that process, it might get kind of jumbled up for me and mixed up. One example I give, I've had the same phone number for 20 years. And sometimes I really have to stop and think about it. I might, if you ask me for my number, I might give you the wrong number. For me, in terms of how it played out being a credit counselor and doing financial education is I was really hiding it for a long time without knowing. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that I had a really hard time repeating numbers back to people. And so I came up with a lot of funny little systems as a counselor, doing budgeting sessions with people. I would ask clients, okay, watch as I put this number in and let's just both make sure together that it's right. And I would do a lot of things like that to make sure that folks were following along, that I wasn't making errors. And then I sort of did something that I think ended up becoming a huge asset to me as a credit counselor, as an educator, is I really focused more on financial concepts as opposed to numbers. And I think that doing that helped make people more comfortable talking to me about money. And it made it easier for me to explain money to people because so many folks, even if they don't have dyscalculia, are kind of afraid to deal with numbers. And so I could sort of talk about ideas like, how do we improve your overall financial well-being? What types of debt are more dangerous for you to carry? So getting more into concepts than talking about numbers. And I felt like that really has helped me connect with people a lot.
Is there one story or a situation where you were in your credit counseling or housing counseling environment that really surprised you, or one story that really sticks out where someone wasn't either understanding the concepts or was having a hard time like fitting it into their own life?
I really enjoyed being able to show people during homebuyer education workshops What happens when you take on a 30-year mortgage at 3 or 4% interest versus 6 or 7% interest, and how much money that can save you. And so when we start talking about these big figures in terms of savings on interest charges, despite the fact that I would really try to reiterate and hammer that point home during workshops, I'd have folks had to come in and follow up with me and do a one-on-one counseling session.
Right.
And I'd have people come in who had already been approved for a mortgage, and I'd say, okay, great. What's your interest rate? And they go, I don't know. And so I would say that was a big concept. I was always surprised that folks had a hard time internalizing how important interest rates are when you're making financial decisions.
And I think that's huge, especially now with interest rates at really an all-time high for mortgages from the 80s, right? It's kind of like back in the 80s, the same kind of thing. So hopefully that'll get better for people. And so what about the pivot to be a personal finance writer from a counselor? How did that kind of take place? And did you find that being a counselor, talking to people one-on-one about their finances and housing issues really helped you become a better writer, or helped your writing relate to people better?
For somebody who's been a credit counselor for a long time, you probably have a library of analogies that you're used to sharing with your clients, about, how credit scores work and how to improve your credit. For a long time, people were using, fitness analogies like, okay, you go to the gym and your weight fluctuates by a few pounds every day, and so does your credit score, things like that, right?
Mhm.
But you really have to learn how to talk to people, and not to, dumb it down too much, I guess, but in simple terms that make sense for somebody who maybe hasn't had the advantage of ever learning just really basic stuff about how money works.
Mhm.
Taking the fear out of it, talking about it in a way that communicates to people like, you can do this too. Even if if you have problems with numbers, you can do this too. We can make this really simple to understand, so that you can start making progress.
Regarding credit counseling, can you tell us what are the biggest misconceptions people have about credit counseling, how it works, what it does?
People may be afraid that if I call, maybe you'll call back and leave a message and my partner might hear about it, right?
Mm.
There was a study from Bankrate last year that said that somewhere between 20 and 30% of people haven't talked to their partner about their finances. So that's something to keep in mind, when somebody calls in and they're on the phone with you. People call in and they have a lot of misconceptions, I think, about what credit counselors can do versus a credit repair company. And so part of the work, I think, is sometimes just helping people clarify their expectations. We're here to give you information. We're here to empower you to make decisions for the rest of your life that work for you financially, but we're not necessarily going to get in and fix something for you that you might be able to fix for yourself.
I was wondering, do you think emotional intelligence plays a role in money management and how people think about money and debt and credit and finance?
Emotional intelligence is probably the unspoken piece of money management, especially
Mm.
in the past. Folks who were really well known. Dave Ramsey is a name that gets thrown around a lot, right? Folks who were really known in the kind of financial education space. Maybe they were sharing tips about how to manage money, but not getting so much into the side of how your emotions play a role in the decisions that you make. There's an emotional driver for a lot of us behind our financial decisions, and even getting somebody to talk about, hey, we're doing a budgeting session, let's start talking about the numbers. You would feel this sort of resistance from a lot of folks, and that really does come from an emotional place. I think about myself and my emotional relationship with money. I have two parents who had very different money management styles. And as a kid, what I took from that is that one was good and one was bad. And the parent who liked to spend a lot, was bad with money, and that caring about money or wanting to spend it was really bad. And saving it and sort of, hiding from it and not thinking about it was good. And so that's something kind of emotional that I brought into money management with me that, I've had to work through over the years. And a lot of people have similar stuff. Maybe they have a negative affiliation with banks that's holding them back in some way. Maybe they feel that impulsive spending gives them a sense of control over their money, even though that's counterproductive, right? But
Right.
yeah, I think it's kind of a hidden piece. I appreciate now that I think, especially with social media, influencers, there's good
Mhm.
and bad, but people talking a little bit more about how emotional money is for us.
And there is so much more openness, I feel like, on social media talking about money. And you just mentioned budgeting. Are there any budgeting strategies or saving strategies that you think people often overlook?
So, what I like to share with people is what are some of the ways that you can make following a budget and improving your finances automatic and kind of build it into your habits without having to have this big fear of I've got to sit down every month or every week and look over every single number and kind of, punish myself for what I've done with my money. One of the best tools that I can recommend for anybody is it's so simple, it's free, it's easy, is just set up an automatic deposit that goes to whatever is your first goal with your finances. So let's say right now you're carrying credit card debt and you want to pay it off. So set up an automatic deposit. A lot of people have auto pay, right? But if you have extra cash in your monthly household budget, increase that payment so that it's just automatic. Instead of paying, the minimum each month, you're paying extra towards your credit card every single month. Once that's paid off, take that amount of money and roll it into whatever is your next biggest goal. Setting
Mhm.
up an automatic deposit to savings can be a huge, can create a huge turnaround for people. Making things like that automatic, I would say, is probably the biggest one. I could offer a lot more, tips in that area, but for me, that's kind of the biggest game changer, if you will.
Yeah, I really think everybody should try to adopt that because it's fairly easy. It's just thinking about it and doing it, right? To
Right.
set it up. But I think it's great. And
Yeah. And once it's done.
right. And then you don't have to think about it anymore. Are there any things in the financial literacy and financial education world that you think needs to change or adapt to fit younger generations and how
Mm.
the younger generation kind of relates to money and people and everything's so digital first now? Do you have any recommendations or insights regarding how financial education can be a part of young people's lives?
Any movement in the direction of making it more socially acceptable to discuss money is fantastic. So I love that there are, you know, not every influencer is super trustworthy when it comes to talking about money, but there are a handful of folks who I think are really fantastic and who are putting good content out there. So I think with that too is also, for educators who've been in this space for a long time, is realizing younger people take in information differently. They're not as used to or as eager to learn in a classroom setting in their free time, for example. Shorter snippets with helpful tips about everyday stuff, I think, are really valuable to younger folks. And quite honestly, I think they're helpful for a lot of us. So I really appreciate the move in that direction.
I was wondering, what's the best piece of advice that you've ever received that you used in your life?
Adopt an attitude that your income has to increase every single year.
Oh.
And I say that I almost want to pause for people to kind of absorb that information. But I
Mhm.
think that if you can take that on as just sort of a personal policy for how you approach finances,
Mhm.
really change your financial well-being. I mean, inflation takes away the power of your money every year. It
Right.
impacts your earning power. Inflation impacts your income and how far it goes to cover your living expenses. How can I make sure that on a regular basis my income is growing, whether by negotiating a pay raise at work, for me as a freelancer, negotiating higher rates on an annual basis,
Mhm.
seeking clients who are able to offer higher rates. If you're a W-2 employee, looking at the market, looking around to see if maybe a move to a new company is going to help you increase your income, talking to your boss about, what do I need to do to make sure that I'm on track for a promotion? So being really proactive about improving your income, increasing your income on an annual basis, I think is absolutely crucial.
Okay, that's a great piece of advice, and
Yeah.
one that I don't think everybody thinks of either, like you're
Mhm.
saying. I think that's a great piece of advice. So, I know you're a prolific freelance writer in the personal finance space, And as such, you're getting assignments from publications about different finance topics. So can you tell me some of the trends you're seeing? What are you being assigned? What do you see out there and people are wanting to read about?
I've seen a handful of kind of been assigned a handful of articles in the vein of paying off debt versus savings, which I think is a really great topic to dive into. It's really important for consumers to have information about that. And it's hard for them to find good information about that. So, talking about how do you prioritize when you have debt, which, as those of us who are following it understand that credit card debt has really skyrocketed and a lot of people are struggling with it. So people are curious about what do you do? Should I be saving money versus paying off debt? And just to make sure nobody's left hanging, the general advice, at least, from myself and a lot of other folks, is focusing on paying off high interest credit card debt first before you start saving. A lot of information just about people who are nearing retirement and what to do, um, how to make, stretch Social Security, what to do about medical expenses. The cost of prescription drugs are a big one. I just wrote a piece about that for AOL. Yeah, helping people deal with the cost of getting healthcare.
It's always a huge topic in this
Yeah.
country, definitely. So
Yeah.
tell us, how can our audience stay in touch with your work? Where can they find articles written by you or your financial education that
Mhm.
you put out?
Yeah. So, in terms of just staying in touch with me on social media, I'm most active on LinkedIn because I work primarily with businesses. So you can follow me. My name on LinkedIn is Sarah Brady, and my title there is personal finance writer. So you can see, if you're interested in the world of sort of writing or consumer advocacy, you can find some information there that I share. If you're interested in seeing what I write about, you can follow some of my articles. These days, I'm writing quite often for Yahoo Finance. I write for the NFCC. Um, some articles you might find on here and there on Kiplinger, Forbes Advisors. So you can type in my name online and type in, personal finance writer, and you'll see what's the latest in most pieces.
Great, great. Thanks so much for that. And my last question is about if you could have dinner with three people, living or dead, who would they be and why?
So interesting right now, and what he's doing is Mark Cuban. For anybody who doesn't know, in fact, I mentioned him to a friend a couple of days ago, and they said, "Oh, the shark guy." I was like, "Yeah, Shark Tank, yes." But I started a company called Cost Plus Drug, and what they're doing is really disrupting the pharmaceutical industry by selling, prescription medications almost at cost. Not only are they bringing down prices of medications, but they are creating a new kind of competition in that industry. So
Mm.
Amazon is now getting into, producing pharmaceuticals. The other one, like I said, I went back and forth about these, but I'm a huge fan of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau,
Mhm.
both as somebody who just cares a lot about consumers and wants them to get really good, trustworthy financial information. So maybe Elizabeth Warren.
Elizabeth Warren, yeah, that's
Mhm. Yeah. I'd love to just talk to her about her advocacy for consumers. Maybe Rohit Chopra, the director. I'd like to, just know more about the day in and day out
yeah.
of the issues that they're challenging right now. The one who stayed on my list from the beginning is my grandma. My grandma is somebody who I think probably a lot of people can relate to this, who taught me a lot that has really impacted how I deal with money in my daily life now. She's the one person I really remember as a kid sitting down at the dinner table, after a meal with her checkbook and meticulously writing out, what she had purchased that day and paying the bills. She's one of the first people I saw, dealing with money and managing it responsibly. And especially to see, a woman as a role model for that in the household, I think was really powerful for me. Yeah, that's my answer.
I think that's a wonderful list, a wonderful list. I would love to be a part of that. And I bet your grandmother would be fascinated by Mark Cuban and Elizabeth Warren too.
Sure, yeah, I mean, when I was younger, I wasn't really paying a lot of attention to my grandparents' conversations about, healthcare and medicine, but maybe I should
Mhm.
have been listening a little bit more too, so
And actually, your grandmother would probably impart wisdom to them, I'm thinking also.
it could be,
Yeah,
yes.
most definitely. All
Yeah.
right, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us for Coffee Talk. Really had a great conversation, and yeah, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to reading your writings and following you on LinkedIn.
Thanks so much, April. It was great. It was great. I appreciate you.